So let's talk about your revelation in a nutshell, because I do believe, like I said, when you take something so big, like we talked about, John Bevere not wanting to do sermons on this for decades because it was so divisional. But when you take something so big as this and you boiled it down in just bite sizes that are so impactful, and let's just take it paragraph by paragraph. The first paragraph you talk about the words great tribulations occur three times in the King James Version of the Bible, but it never points to the 7 years of Jacob's trouble. And you list, Matthew 24:21, Revelation 2:22, and then Revelation 7:14. So what does that tell you that it three times it's mentioned, but it never points to 7 years of Jacob's trouble?
It's mentioned those three times. What I have found is almost everyone you talk to, they want to quote the 7 years or the Great Tribulation, that term, Great Tribulation,
Right.
and they act as though it is the 7 years of Great Tribulation. And then when you find that how it is really used in the Bible, it doesn't point to that. So we confuse ourselves with terms like that. And what it does for me and what I was trying to spell out there, Great Tribulation is really the way we use it in our society today. It is nothing more than a man made term that is pretty much meaningless because it doesn't match or follow what the scripture is speaking of. In Matthew 24, forget what verse it was I quoted there,
21. Yep, 21.
21,
Yep.
it is speaking of how bad the tribulation would be for Israel during the second half of the 7 years when they're being persecuted by Satan and the Antichrist. So again, it's how bad their persecution is going to be. It's not speaking of the full 7 years. And then when it's used in uh, Revelation 7, verse 9, we see great tribulation there. And people want to say, oh, it's this great multitude that's been taken out of great tribulation, and there's seven to say in the 7 years. And that's not what it's directing itself toward whatsoever. When it says they have escaped great tribulation, it's talking about the tribulation that's coming upon the saints with the opening of the fifth seal when they're being persecuted and put to death. So what has happened is this great multitude has escaped out of that end time tribulation period that they were going through and being martyred for. And again, in chapter 5, those martyrs are being persecuted for their faith. They're not being converted because they refuse to worship the beast. They're already worshiping Christ and worshiping God, and they're being murdered and persecuted because of that faith and that belief. So that was the second time it's used. Actually, that's the third time. The second time is actually in Revelation 2, and is it 22? Do you have that
20.
up?
Yep, 22. Yep.
22. And that is talking about, I believe, the church at Thyatira. And it's talking about how great their tribulation is going to be. Well, that was the letter to the church that Christ wrote through John approximately 2,000 years ago. So that certainly wasn't speaking of the 7 years of great tribulation that we call it. So those are the three times that the Bible uses that, and we confuse ourselves with it. So I was trying to point out that we need to, I like to tell people when you're talking about what we call the Great Tribulation, you should always specify either the 7 years of Jacob's trouble or Daniel's 70th week. Those are the only two biblical terms that the Bible uses to describe that 7 year time frame.
So really what you're saying is 7 years of Jacob's trouble is the biblical term for what we humans called the Great Tribulation.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's it
But
in a nutshell.
and we're confusing different periods of tribulation talked about in scripture with that 7 years of Jacob's trouble.
Yes. And really, when you really take even just the word tribulation, if you
Yep.
break it down and you just look at the word tribulation, I believe it's used 19 times in the Bible. And 18 of those 19 times it's talking about tribulation directed towards the body of Christ or the church
Hmm.
here on earth. One
Yep.
time it's speaking of tribulation that's being directed towards the body of Christ or the church and the world both. So
Hmm.
that is how the word tribulation is used in the scriptures. So when we try to take great tribulation and make it be a noun that is specifically talking about the 7 years of Jacob's trouble, we are doing a disservice to what the scripture is really telling us.
Okay. So, so let's move on to your second paragraph there, because this is the whole thing I enjoyed, but I found this interesting. Six books of the Bible point to the rapture of the church, and you mention those. Hang on a second, Barney. I got to take this phone call. Hang on.
Right.
Yes, sir. I am in the middle of a quick meeting. What do you need? No, buddy, don't. We've got no, no, no. Don't worry about it. You know what? I'll come get the table later today. How's that? And then you don't have to worry about it, and don't worry about the stairs. Those stairs were not that big of a deal anyway, because we've got more up here in the attic. Okay? No, no, no. Those were no, and I'll tell you why later. But are you home today then? Okay, I will call you after this, and I'll come get it. Okay, okay, bye. Oh boy. Anyway, no, but going back to the second paragraph, the six books of the Bible point to the rapture of the church. And what really caught my eye was that each mentions the sun and moon referencing the cosmic signs, or events that would occur during the time of the rapture. So again, going back to that, yes, we don't know the date or the hour. However, I mean, there are signs that they point to, right?
Yes.
Yep. And I mean, clear back in Genesis, when God created the stars and the heavens, it's for signs. That's one of the reasons he created it.
Exactly. They were for signs. And the
Yep.
big thing there is I like that all six of these mention that common happening where the sun is darkened and the moon is turned to blood. Most of them, I think one of them does not mention the stars, but all the others mention the stars falling. And so you've got that common denominator. And what makes it interesting is it shows up in Revelation chapter 6 and verse 12.
Hmm.
And that's where most mid-trib or mid-tribulation rapture people point to the rapture of the church. Now, I am solidly pre-trib. I think they got the right location in Revelation where the rapture takes place. It's at 612, but that is a pre-trib rapture. And what's interesting is you tie these sun and moon being darkening, that's cosmic sign events, and you go back to Luke, and Luke is basically not Luke, it's Acts. Luke wrote it.
Yep.
So you go back to Acts chapter 2 there,
Hmm.
and Luke is referencing Joel when he talks about it in his second chapter of his book.
Right.
And the nice thing that Luke does in Acts, he says that people will still be getting saved. So that confirms again that there's going to be salvation taking place. That's the rapture of the church, all the way up through the rapture of the church. After the rapture of the church, I don't believe people get saved in that sense. The only way you can really make it to heaven is to allow yourself to be beheaded. You refuse to worship the beast, and
Right.
you don't have to refuse the mark. They won't allow you to have the mark if you don't worship the beast. But as
Right.
soon as you refuse to worship the beast, they're going to chop your head off. Well, that's not getting saved.
No.
And that's the only way to get out of the 7 years of tribulation after the rapture's taken place. That's the only way you can make it to heaven. So that was something new for me when I discovered those verses in Acts, in that it also was tied to getting saved.
Well, and you know what's interesting too about this passage? I watched and opened the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of goat hair. The whole moon turned blood red. And we've had those, oh, how can I say? Well, those blood moons, and we just had one recently.
Yep.
Um, you know, and so it's interesting the terminology, and is that really what? is going to happen? We're going to have a blood moon, or is it going to be more intense than that? We've had eclipses, we've had, um, and there's and you've talked about too, though, how we could darken the sun.
Right.
Um,
I think what we've had in the past are little tiny wake up signs,
okay,
uh, little post-it notes that say, "Hey, pay attention! It's coming! It's getting closer." I don't personally believe that we've seen the sun darkened yet. I don't think we've really seen the moon turn to blood yet. Uh, and then it also talks about the stars of heaven falling. Those really real stars? In some of my discussions, we've talked about, not you and I, but myself and others, that could be a matter of the shift of the Earth's axis. So if the stars look like they have fallen, they're not there any longer or something. It
hmm
could also be ICBM missiles being launched and falling to Earth. Some have referenced that.
okay,
I don't know what it will be specifically, but I don't think we've seen that happen yet. And then the third thing it talks about, there will be a great earthquake. Now we've talked for years about earthquakes, and we've had a lot of really bad earthquakes. But I
sure.
think when the Bible says a great earthquake, we're talking about something that's going to distinguish itself out in such a way, immediately be obvious to all mankind that we've never seen anything like this before.
To
And I think
me,
all of that will happen right before the rapture.
and to me, that great earthquake is a shift of the Earth on its axis because
That may well be it.
yeah, that impacts the entire globe. I mean, there will be things that come up out of the water, and then there will be things that, um, the equator will be different, climates will be. I mean, it's just a point in time where things just shift greatly
Yeah.
uh, when that happens.
And I've talked, I've got written in my books where what's going to cause the sun to go dark, what's going to cause all these things, what may be the trigger to trigger these earthquakes or this earthquake. Shouldn't say these. I think it'd be one massive one, and that's where I've written and talked about. I think it's very potentially that the sun. We talked or I've talked about how instead of being a plasma or a ball that's on fire, it's plasma. And the belief now is by major scientists that it is probably powered by um, magnetic waves.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. I remember you saying that now.
And,
Yep.
the waves affect the sun just about like a rheostat would affect an LED light bulb. In brightening it, you turn it up, it brightens, and you back it off, and it turns it down. So,
Well, and it makes sense to me because if I look at it this way, let's say, for just sake of argument, that we do have a shift of the Earth on its axis, and so you know, again, the equators are different. Um, the sun hitting the Earth is different, so maybe what's something in that was a warm climate becomes a cold climate becomes a warm climate, and definitely that to me would impact. Obviously, if you have a shift of the Earth on its axis, you're going to have a magnetic shift. And that could also create this magnetic shift with the sun and the moon for a period of time.
yeah.
Every until everything kind of settles back down um, into kind of the baseline. But it's going to take some time with that big of a change for things to kind of go back to normal.
Yeah, and it affects so much. Our whole world is an
Yeah.
electronic world today. We work in everything we do almost depends upon these geostationary satellites around the world to run our GPS positioning systems.
hmm
Our whole military is nowadays so focused on having that kind of technology that without it, it reduces us to probably a third world power.
hmm
Um, the only good thing out of that, it would also reduce the other world powers to nothing more than world powers. But we lose so much of our supremacy there. But once that happens, it's going to impact the entire world. I mean, just a few years ago, we had Atlanta and other major airports were shifting some of their runway designations because the magnetic north had actually moved and shifted enough that it was
Yep.
no longer, you had runways that they used to have designated as north and south, and all of a sudden now they're being designated east and west, or vice versa. And so we have experienced that in our time. And many people probably aren't even aware of that. But how much more when you have a real geo shift or an earthquake that really shifts the poles?
Yep. Yep. Well, and the thing is this, if we're paying attention, I mean, Barney, there's a lot of earthquake activity happening all over
There
right
is.
now. I mean, we've had earthquakes here in Lake Michigan a couple weeks ago, 2.9 along the New Madryn Fault. You've got earthquake activity out in California. You've got the earthquake activity in the Philippines. You've got earthquake activity down in Venezuela. I mean, and this is just stuff in the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah. Think of what things would be like if we finally had this massive earthquake
Right,
that it's
right.
so distinguishable that the Bible calls it a earthquake or an earthquake.
Right. Yes,
And
yeah,
we see the sun actually darken, and that happens, and I believe it'll be an ongoing happening. I don't think it's going to be darkened and an hour later it's now light again,
no, no,
even
no.
24 hours later it's light again. I think it
Right.
will be over at the very minimum a course of multiple days, probably multiple weeks.
Yes.
And so is that going to be the last warning sign God gives to his apostate church to finally wake up and get back to him?
Yeah.
That's a lot of what I've thought about lately is we should have those signs. We're going to see the sun, we're going to see the moon, we're going to see probably the stars have an impact, and we're going to see this massive earthquake. And, it's our wake up call that the next thing to happen is the rapture. And it's not like it's a year out, it's going to be imminent.
Imminent. Yep. Yep. I know. I agree. And the thing is, like all these things you're mentioning, it's happening. I mean, you're seeing meteorites fall that they didn't predict or didn't know was coming. You're seeing damage in different places from meteorites. It's
Yeah,
there. Uh, so the earthquakes are happening, the meteorites are happening. All of this is happening, and it's happening with greater frequency and different intensity all over the globe right now.
exactly.
And you know, for me, just looking at the earth and just that the balance that's maintained, and what I mean by that is the balance that God created in terms of like, us needing oxygen and the trees and the fauna and the flora needing our carbon dioxide in that balance that has been created and maintained over the years. And as we have introduced pollution and we have taken things from the Earth's crust and we've altered that balance and that continues to be altered. And at some point, it's to me, it's like a tipping point. Okay, we can't do this anymore.
Hmm.
you know, and that leads to or brings about this shift of the earth or a great earthquake. But definitely, I can see that happening, and I do believe that the sun being darkened would be impacted. And I agree with you. I do believe it's not going to be for 2 or 3 hours. It's going to be across days or weeks
Yeah.
before things settle. Oh, well, I mean, are you guys being impacted at all by the Canadian wildfires, the smoke?
Yes, we are. Went to church yesterday morning, and all the way there, I felt like I want to take my glasses off and wipe them off so I could see better.
Yeah.
I knew there's
Well,
nothing but the glasses.
yeah, same here. So, being in central Illinois, Chicago all last week had been impacted. We hadn't been. But going to church yesterday, you could really tell it. And then when I walked out of church, and kind of out on the edge of town, big open space, man, you could really see it. And today, you it's I mean the sun's even covered because it's so thick today.
Yeah,
It's
we've had it, and I remember having some of this last year. But what
right.
really interesting to me is, you know, grew up, I don't remember ever in my lifetime until just last year or maybe the year before, but I think it was last year was the first year. I've never heard of this before where you've had major wildfires in Canada and the
right,
smoke has drifted clear down here into the states and
right,
impacted us.
right, right.
And I think, some of these states that are quite a ways below us have been impacted as well. That's why
Well,
we got from last year.
yeah, because it went clear to Texas last year.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's pretty
Oh,
far south.
and you think it goes west to east, the wind pattern, so it'd be go so why is it that it's coming down? Yeah, I agree. There's something different about that even happening because yeah, this has never happened like this before. And they've had
Yeah,
wildfire,
yeah, we've had
so
the wildfires, and and can you imagine how bad it is for them if we've got smoke like this and we're hundreds of miles away?
right, right, right. But my point is, as I look out, I mean, it's almost like a overcast, cloudy day, but it's not because of the clouds, it's because of the smoke.
Yeah,
It's really, 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 really wild. And when you think about that, so no, it's interesting. Again, this simplification, looking at that just through common events and the cosmic signs that you're talking about. I mean, they're happening. They're happening now, all around us. Not cosmic signs, but signs that something is coming is happening. And definitely, I agree that we have experienced these in smaller doses before.
right. I think so. And then kind of back to that little, writing, Revelation in a nutshell.
Yep.
Then that's what they did when we could dismiss that great tribulation was not really pointing to that 7 years. Then that also left me kind of go back to the other words, and I go back to the original Greek. You got ochlo, palu, or
Olu. Yep.
yeah, I don't know whether I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not a Greek scholar. I've studied it some, but that term is used three times in the book of Revelation, and it's not translated that way always, at least not in the King James. But what it does is it ties this great multitude, and that's what that Ochu Palu translates best as, it's great multitude. Then
Hmm.
it allows it to point to the church. And again, that goes back to that chapter 7, verse 9, where we have been taught most of our lives that is the great end time revival that happens after the rapture of the church. That's happens, to the people that are left behind. That is
Right.
so false. That term is great multitude, and it's the same term we see back in Revelation chapter 19, verse 1 and verse 6,
Yep.
where Revelation is talking about Christ coming back with his church. That's his raptured church and the saints that died before the church was raptured. And that is the great multitude. And the only difference in those words are absolutely identical in 19:1 and 19:6, and they are feminine, representing the bride of Christ in chapter 19, because you got the marriage of the Lamb taking place. What you have in 7, verse 9, you have the same words, but they are masculine. They're not feminine in their tense. So there, that word is the church, but it has not yet become the bride. So it is being used by John in a masculine, or written in a masculine sense, has a masculine ending there.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that takes you to another step of putting this all together. Where for years we've been told that great multitude in chapter 9, or chapter 7, verse 9, is those end time martyrs. Well, that's not end time martyrs, but end time beheading people that refuse the mark of the beast. That's not so at all. The refusal of the mark of the beast, and those individuals show up in chapter 15, verse 2. And that's what I said. It just makes and simplifies Revelation so much when you get all the pieces and parts put together in the right order and you understand them. It makes Revelation so easy and simple to understand.
So, Barney, one other thing that has struck me is digging through this, with your teachings and learnings and all that. It really does strike me that Israel is front and center in end times.
Absolutely.
And it also strikes me that um, Israel, to me, the some of the significance of the end times is really giving them another chance to accept Christ.
Well, that's really, when you look at, what did Daniel said? It's Daniel's 70th week. It is all about Israel. It's that last 7 years to bring them back to Christ,
Right, right,
to
right.
redeem them. They have been a very uh, wandering nation their whole lifetime. I read
Mm,
something interesting today. I was reading in Joshua, and if you remember back, Abraham was commanded to circumcise himself and his family on the
yep.
eighth day, and
Hmm.
they kept that. And I wasn't aware that they had ever ceased keeping that. But I was reading today after Moses died, and Joshua was getting ready to go in and take the city of Jericho. Before he did that, God called him aside and told him to uh, circumcise all the people again. And again, is a little bit misleading when you read that in that verse there or that chapter. And when I
Chapter
go and I
5.
studied that and I looked at it, what it really meant was when what had happened when Moses led the Hebrew children out of Egypt,
Hmm.
while they were wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, they stopped the practice of circumcision. And I was not aware of that. So Joshua was called by God to not to really to go out and circumcise all the people. All the ones that had died that didn't get to go into the promised land, they were circumcised. They came out of Egypt. But
Right.
all those new ones that were born in the wilderness had not been circumcised. But before they were allowed to go in and possess the land, Joshua had to circumcise all the people. And then while they were healing, it wasn't until after they were healed from the circumcision did they go and take Jericho. And had never seen that before.
So
But
in
that's,
chapter 5 in Joshua, he talks about that.
yep.
Yep. Their sons with their, wow. Okay. Interesting.
And that's in a
Well,
sense what they've done again today. They may still practice circumcision, but they have turned away from Christ. They rejected him 2,000 years ago.
right.
But the 7 years that's coming up, that 7 years of Jacob's trouble, is all about getting their attention and turning them back to God and to his Christ that he offered to them.
Well, and here's what I will say that I notice right now. And I'm not talking about the citizens of Israel. I'm not talking about the Jewish people. I'm talking about the current government of Israel. Really does seem to be anti-Christ in the way they're approaching just geopolitics right now,
Yep.
um, in the different things that they're doing. And so it's that, how can I say this? It's almost that strong, um, that look, we reject Christ as the Messiah. We reject Christ, and that's being, again, it's not the people of Israel, it's not the Jewish people, but it's the current government and the people that lead that, state really are almost taking that firm stand. Hey, in the things that they're doing and, their approach to different things in the Middle East and globally.
Mm-hmm. Well, we got to
So,
remember the whole, all of Israel, whether it be the political leadership or whether it be the people.
yep.
I don't know about you or the rest of the people in the world, but I think so many of us have had this concept that as soon as the peace accords are signed or these peace treaty, whatever it
Right,
is,
right,
you know,
right.
it's peace, peace, peace. But when you really read the scripture and you look at it, as soon as that is signed, that's what releases the 2 million man army that goes out and begins killing a third of mankind. And we're immediately told that the Israel, or really Jerusalem, is overrun by the Gentiles. So,
Hmm.
and what's that going to look like? That takes place right after the rapture of the church. I believe the rapture of the church takes place, and then probably about a year later, the 7 years of Jacob's trouble that we've talked about gets kicked off with the signing of this peace agreement.
Hmm.
And then all these problems break out. Uh, so, right now we look at Israel being with the United States almost invincible, but her geopolitical situation, I think, is going to drastically change after the rapture of the church and after that 1 year that I believe will probably be in there before the 7 years of Jacob's trouble takes off and gets started.
And you know what? I think they're, and I'm just going to be honest, I think their geopolitical, um, just their, I don't know, the way the world views them has changed ever since this attack on Iran.
I'm
Um,
sure
there,
it does.
there's, there's, um, there's something there. Not only here in the United States, people are looking at Israel differently, but I think worldwide, that's being enhanced. So, yeah, and I definitely see that continuing to build just based on the reactions. And that's why it's so surprising that right now, to me, that, we have that bill in Congress, um, looking at next year's National Defense Authorization Act, doing things that really bring the U.S. military and Israeli military, together.
Hmm.
I think that's interesting. And even today on the news, you have pundits talking about, um, it looks like Israel's being brought into the picture more and more to help the U.S. with Israel. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. But the pundits are talking about the Israeli capability, to help with this situation in Iran. But obviously, there's something going on there.
Yeah, it's just I think things are going to turn a drastically different turn from what people are expecting.
Yes.
We as Christians won't be here to see it,
Yeah.
but my whole life, we got these different concepts. My whole life, I had thought, as soon as that peace treaty signed, it's going to be peace for Israel, but I
Right.
don't believe that's the case at all.
Mm-mm.
Uh, it's just like I used to always, you look and think, and uh, was always terrified before I got saved that the rapture would take place and I missed it somehow or other.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, I think we're going to have some good warning signs, and hopefully that'll be a wake up call to the lukewarm Christians. That'll be an opportunity for us to really encourage them to get back to God and dig in and get their lamps lit
Yep.
and well
Yep.
oiled before the Master comes.
But well, and I also hope, Barney, that it takes, the church really at those points where the big things happen, the church steps up and starts, not preaching this, but really starts talking the truth to people, about what is occurring,
Hmm.
uh, and helping people become ready, um, for that. Because I believe there's all this stuff building up, and it's building up to the big thing. And to me, those are signs. It's not the sign or the signs, but it's building towards those signs.
Yeah.
And no matter where you look, or I mean, I don't care who you talk to today, whether you talk to a believer or a non-believer, again, people are saying something big is coming.
Yeah. There's a feeling in the air. It's
Yes, yes, yes. And they can't articulate what that is. Now, when you talk to a believer, the believers go to end times immediately. But a non-believer, as you're talking to them, they'll say something big is coming, but they can't articulate it.
I agree.
So it is interesting, and I've noticed that more in the past 12 months than at any point in my life. And I lived through, the 70s, where, late great planet Earth and A Thief in the Night. I mean, I remember sitting in church, probably, was that what I've been in? I still would have been in grade school. And on a Sunday night, the whole church, we watched A Thief in the Night.
Hmm.
That was the Sunday night service. And you never took anything into the sanctuary, but that night, as we watched this movie together, we were allowed to, take popcorn in, small little sacks of popcorn in, to the sanctuary as we watched A Thief in the Night. But it seemed so real, and so imminent, and yet I didn't have the same feeling that I have today.
Yeah. I've never seen that movie. I don't think I've even heard of it. I've left some of the, have watched some of the Left Behind series, but I've never watched the last one you just mentioned.
Yeah, no, and I've read all the Left Behind series books, and it's the movie kind of really follows that, but it just it makes it makes it the event of the rapture real in a way that maybe perhaps just reading it doesn't. When you saw different people's lives impacted that played roles in the movie, and then the different things that just stopped instantly because people were doing it. So very, 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 very interesting. But again, I thought, man, this is imminent. Like this is going to happen here in the next, couple of years. Well, that was decades ago. However, I still didn't feel at that point in time the same way I feel today with knowing that something big is coming.
Well, that's kind of where I've been looking at. I've got the uh, feast days, and I
Yes.
still thoroughly believe that Christ will probably return on the Feast of Trumpets. Just makes
Hmm.
sense. And we're running out of Feast of Trumpets before that 80th generation or 80-year generation has passed. That we've
Right.
gone
Right.
on that 80 generation or 80-year marking spot, which seems to be spoken of by, I think that's Psalms 90, verse 10. But
So let's back up what we've said today. So here, you know, again, you're not saying the date or the hour, but you're saying you believe that it will coincide with the Feast of Trumpets, which could be over a 3-day period, correct?
yes, it is.
Okay, okay. But before that happens, this something big probably will happen first.
That's what I've been thinking. For several years now, I've been following the Feast of Trumpets and watching when it would happen in the fall. And
Right.
one will be this year, will be next year. And I've been watching that for 5 or 6 years now. And
Hmm.
that's what I said, we've only got this year and next year before we pass that 80-year generation mark. Now, what happened within that, I don't know. But the big thing I've noticed, particularly like with this last little writing, and I've been thinking about lately, we will have the signs of the sun darkening, the moon turning to blood, probably stars falling, definitely a great earthquake that will stand out different from any we've ever had in the world before. This should
Yes.
all be precursors right before the rapture of the church. Now, how
Hmm.
much right before? Will it be months or a month or just weeks or days? I don't know. It may be a matter of nothing more than days. Because to be honest with you, I have a picture of our society. If those things started happening, I think it would wake up our society for a few days. But if the sun stayed dark and the moon stayed blood and it went on for 2 or 3 months, they'd be right back to their same old attitude.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
not sure it would have, and it may not have a change on people anyway. But
Right.
my real
Right.
concern is they would change for a month or a few weeks, but once it went 2, 3 months, they'd be right back to, oh well, it just that's it happened. There's nothing about
They,
it.
they would be building the golden calf.
Good parallel. Yes, they'd be right back to here's our golden calf. We're going to do what we want to do, and we're not worried about God anymore. We took
Well,
care of agreeing with Him for 2 or 3 weeks.